Hello everyone, today's poem is 枫桥夜泊 by Zhang Ji. The poet is not famous when he was alive, and many years later he became very famous just only because of this poem, a masterpiece, and it's a very popular poem among the Japanese. So even in the Qing dynasty, there's a record that a lot of Japanese, they visit Suzhou city, and then they always drop by this temple, this bridge. Fengqiao is a bridge, maple bridge, and what's more, the Japanese even built a temple, a bridge according to this poem, and named the same name, Fengqiao, the maple bridge, Hanshan temple, after it. So if you went to Japan somewhere, you will see a Hanshan temple, a maple bridge as well, but that's just a replica of the temple of Suzhou, and also it's only because of this very famous poem by Zhang Ji. Till today, we don't know much about the poet himself because he was in the period of the Civil War and after Civil War, so that's a time of chaos, a time of changing. So there's no much things left during that time, especially for the things associated with poet literacy. But for the sake of the imperial exams, we still have something left about the poem because he passed the imperial exam just 2 years before the Civil War broke. Anyhow, he didn't get a position because the procedure is pass the imperial exam is the first thing first, and then you should have to go through with some of the interview in the central government in the capital city Chang'an. This poet Zhang Ji didn't pass the interview, so he still jobless, stayed in the very expensive capital city Chang'an for 2 years until the Civil War broke. So he's not with a very good character, and he's not good at lobbering or make friends. And in one of his poems, he said, 钓与时人辈，新疆敬者论，终年地场里，不识武侯门. So he stayed all year long in the capital city, but he don't know any noble or high-ranking officials at all. So that could be one of the major reasons he didn't get the job from the central government. And when the Civil War broke, like the most people, the people fled from the capital city and avoid the chaos of the war or the killings of the war. And majorly, there's two directions of the fleet. One is follow the emperor to go to the Sichuan province or the southwest direction. The other way is go to the southeast direction, so to the Jiangsu province, to the Hunan province, so the areas in the downstream or midstream of the Yangtze River. So Zhang Ji went to the downstream of the Yangtze River. So that's why we had this masterpiece today. And in his rest of his life, he stayed in that area, Jiangsu and Jiangxi province. Basically, it's the downstream of the Yangtze River area. Anyhow, it's not for long because finally, roughly 7 or 8 years after the Civil War broke. He was appreciated by some of the high-ranking officials. He was assigned a job, but it didn't work too long to fulfill his dreams, to fulfill his pursuit. He died in his position, and very quickly his wife died as well because of the poverty. And so he has some of the very good friends, famous poet as well, Liu Changqing. We had one of the poem from Liu Changqing, 枫桥夜归人. And from the poems of Liu Changqing write about the family things or death of Zhang Ji, we know he died of poverty on his duty, and his wife died very soon. And it was in such a poverty that they don't have any money to send his carcass back to his hometown, Xiangyang. So basically that's the upstream along the Yangtze River, and then from the Wuhan city today, go upstream to the Han River, Hanshui, and then they will get to his hometown, Xiangyang. They don't have any money to send him back and to bury him in his hometown. So it's very, very poor. Even his job, his duty is a tax collector. That is a very lubricate job. If he want to make money, definitely he will have a lot of money. So we can see he is a very decent, honest, and person with very strict integrity with him. And that's not an easy thing, because the poverty, also that's a time of chaos. Nobody knows the next days it will die or still alive, or any big disasters will happen the next day. So it's not an easy thing to keep with his virtue, with integrity. Okay, let's have this very simple and popular poems now. 枫桥夜泊，张继。月落乌啼霜满天，江枫渔火对愁眠。姑苏城外寒山寺，夜半钟声到客船。Okay, I will read this once more with the dialect of 陕西秦腔。枫桥夜北长鸡，月落乌啼霜满天，江枫渔火对愁眠。姑苏城外寒山寺，夜半钟声到客船。Okay, that's Qinqiang, the dialect of Shanxi, or could be the official language or the pronunciation in the Tang dynasty. 夜泊枫桥, parking the boat at the Maple Bridge. So this is a place outside the Suzhou city. Suzhou city is a very, very ancient city. And before the Tang dynasty, it's just a sort of the normal city in the South China. So in that time, that's South China, and the Canton is not South China. It's the place of the barbarians, of the savages. So basically, it's a quite different will from today. So Suzhou is a social place, but it's sort of the small place, but a civilized place already. And Because of the Civil War, the most prosperous place area along the Yellow River is the battlefield, though the people there was killed or fled from the place, though they went to the Yangtze River area or the Sichuan province. And thus, because these places, there's no battles, there's no ruins by the battles, so they still can lead a life without the troubles of the wars, of the killings of the wars. So you can see so many poems in written in the Civil War or after the Civil War is along this area. And before the Civil War, the focal point is the Yellow River area or the frontier area. So that's the significance of the Civil War of the Tang Dynasty, 安史之乱, and also that's the significance for even for the Chinese history. From that time, the northern areas became a social place because the people was killed from time to time through the histories, and then the people fled to the Yangtze River and finally to the Pearl River of Canton through the time, and gradually the South China became a prosperous place and a place of richness. To keep that in mind, the poet Zhang Ji himself, he fled from the capital city because of the war, and along the journey he saw so many disasters, killings, and miserables of the people of the country, and then finally it arrived to the place of Suzhou city, and that's a place of a small town, a less developed place, but it's quite safe, and definitely you see the people from the war areas from time to time, because the people is fleeing all the time from the Yellow River area to the South China, to the Yangtze River area, to the Sichuan province. 月落乌啼霜满天, though the moon has gone down and the crow is singing, the crow bird is singing. 霜满天, the frost is all over the heavens. And normally, if you see some of the typical explanation of 霜满天, the frost is all over the heavens, the skies. It's hard to explain, so they just said the frost is everywhere. In the real situation, yes, it means it's in the very cold season. In the winter, the frost is everywhere. But 满天 is a catchword even today in the place of Shanxi, in the dialect of Shanxi. So it means everywhere. So if we explain this sentence with today's dialect of Shanxi, it still make the very sound reasons. So basically, the first sentence tells three things. The moon dropped below the horizon, and the crow singing, and the frost is everywhere. So it's a cold season. And I had to say the one thing: the crow is not a good fortune bird for Chinese, and the singing of the crow bird is a sign of some of the disasters that will happen. So which means if you heard the crow singing, there would be a disaster ahead. So that's the belief of the Chinese even till today. The only exception is for the ethnic race of Man, so who is the master or the emperor of the Qing dynasty. They believe the crow is a bird with good fortune. So if you went to Beijing near the Forbidden City, the main street, the Chang'an Street, you will see a lot of the crow birds. That because the emperor or the ethnic race of the Qing dynasty, the Man race, they have a different opinion over the crow bird. 江枫渔火对愁眠。江枫 the maple tree along the river. 渔火 the light from the fisherman's boat. And 对愁眠. So here, in the second sentence, the poet himself shows up. So the maple tree and the light of the fish boat. So the light of fish boat actually is an alternative name for the fisherman or the fisherman's boat. So they are facing each other. 对. And they are facing each other, and it's so worried. 愁 is worrying about something, and is so worried. And 愁眠 means it's in such a worry. It didn't sleep. 眠 normally means sleep, but 对愁眠 means the poet himself is facing the maple trees alongside the river, and together with the light from the fisherman's boat. And he was in such a worry, and he cannot sleep because of the crow bird singing. There's some of the huge disasters ahead tomorrow. Let's see. Gusu 城外寒山寺. So Gusu is an ancient name for Suzhou city. Hanshan Si is a temple, Buddhist temple, still exists till today. Gusu 城外寒山寺, the Hanshan temple outside of Suzhou city. 夜半钟声到客船. So it's midnight. 夜半 it's a midnight, and the bell of the temple rings, and also the sound of the boat arriving was heard by the poet. So there's a little bit shortened form in the last sentence. So basically it means in the midnight, and with the sound of the bell ringing, and the poet heard the sound that the passenger boat arrives at the door of the temple. So it didn't write in such details, but definitely that's what he wants to express, because it's in a wild place outside of Tang. The temple is the only place, and the boat just anchored, and the temple is definitely is a destination for the passengers on the boat. Let's have a review of the whole poem now. So with the first two sentences, it depicts the scenario surroundings, but the wording is in such a tense. In just 14 characters, it depicts 6 things. The moon dropped, the crow singing, and the frost is all over. And then the maple trees alongside the river, and the light from the fisherman's boat, and the poet himself. He's in such a worry, he cannot sleep. So in such a tense, and also it's a bit negative because the crowd is sinning, and the poet himself is in such a worry. He cannot sleep in the midnight. So he hears everything later on when the bell rings, when the passenger boat arrives, anchors, and get into the temple. So he hears everything because he's awake. And in the third and fourth sentences, the tension with the very lot of things, the tension in the first two sentences, it disappears. It became a very relaxed wording. 姑苏城外寒山寺, a whole sentences just said one thing, the place. And here you can see the space, the place. We got it in the Tang poems. You always try to always find the place and the time. And in the last sentence, we see the time, 夜半. In the midnight. It's not a long time period. It's just in the pinpoint of the midnight. And the bell rings. The bell rings also is another, has the very strong metaphor for the time changing, because the bell in the temple, especially in this temple, the Hanshan temple, it rings from time to time. So when you hear the bell rings, you know some amount of time has passed. And then the last sound, the sound of the passenger boat anchoring, the people arriving, it makes the silent night became a little bit disturbed. So this is quite a simple poem. Even he describes so many things in the first two sentences, and then he depicts the very point, the very place. Something happened in the Hanshan temple. It's a very simple poem so far as we can see it. But if we look back to the lifestyles of the Tang dynasty, there's a big question here. So in the Tang dynasty, the people normally lives in two type of place. The city or the town, which was surrounded by a wall. And when the sun goes down, it's the curfew time, so nobody was allowed to walk outside of the house or walk on the street. And in the wild place, when the sun goes down, a small village with no walls, the people will always stay indoors to stay away from the burglaries, from the gangsters. So they always shut their doors very closely. So for a Tang people, when the sun goes down, everything stops, or anything, any activities stops, and there's not a person on the street except the soldiers or the guard, the night guard. And sometimes in the big cities, there's still a lot of the entertainment in the nighttime, but it was always within the wall. Let's say in the capital city, Chang'an, the huge city was divided into 108 sectors. So each sector has their own walls. So after the sun goes down, nobody was allowed to go outside of the wall of the sector he lived. But in some sectors, there's still a lot of the entertainment going on only within the sectors. So in this point, the focal point has two things. One is the Gusu city, the Suzhou city today. The other focal point is the Hanshan temple. So Gusu city is a based order of curfews, and Hanshan temple follows the normal routines that when the sun goes down, the door of the temple was shut close, and there's nobody outside of the temple, and nobody was expected at all outside of the temple in the wild place. So for today's people, actually we are quite used to do some activity, to do the things in the nighttime and sleep at the daytime. But for Tang people, two things will be very distinguished in this point. The crowds, and in the midnight, some guest is knocking on the doors. What happens? Something big, or something should be big enough. Well, that make people is traveling in the midnight, but still he cannot go into the Suzhou city because that was a curfew. The Tang, the city's door was shut very closely. So it was shut down. He can never go to that into that city after curfew time. So he had to stay outside of the town in the temple. And by the way, the temple in the ancient China is always works like a guest house. It always works as like a guest house. So that's where naturally the passenger boat stopped in front of the temple, and they are going into the temple very soon. So basically, you should know the differences in a Tang, the life of difference of the Tang time and days, and then you can figure out what's the point is really meanings. So for the passengers, it can be anybody, could be a ambassador from the central government to send out some of the very urgent messages to Suzhou city, but he cannot go into the city at the midnight, so he had to wait in the temple until the daytime comes. Maybe it's a war alert, the rebellion's coming, or it's a message between some of the families, your relatives, your friends has some change. He died in the war. He fled to some other place. There's no other message since then. Or could be the people fleeing from the Yellow River areas. The war is battling on the ground of his homeland, and he had to flee to the South China, to the Yangtze River area, to the Sichuan province. So that could be anything. And if you are Tang people of the time, you will thought much more than what I have said, the possibilities. That will definitely make you cannot sleep, won't sleep for the whole night. That will definitely make you awake for the whole night. And so that's the wonderful technique of the tongue points. They appreciate you write something, but not write the things in details, not write everything completely. Leave the space, let the readers to figure out. And also, each reader has their own background, has their own stories. They can put something into the poems. Even the poet didn't try to express that stuff. Maybe the poet himself only expressed he may be worried about the ambassador, official ambassador, to send the war message to Suzhou area. Alert. But if you are someone fleeing from the capital city, you may think it could be someone fleeing from the capital, and let's see if he's my old friends, if he's my neighbors. So there's too much things not mentioned in the poem, but that's what's left for the readers. And also, for the poet himself, he was already in such a worry with the first two sentences. He cannot sleep. And the newcomers on the boat, the sound makes him worry more. And there's a contrast in the writing techniques as well. It's in such a tension, 14 characters, and write about 6 things in such a tension. And in the third and fourth sentence, the wording is in such a relaxed wording, because 14 characters, it only write 2 things: the place and someone's coming down, and the place and the time, and the 3 things, I should say, but still a quite relaxed wording. But this makes the contrast, the worry, more. That's why this poem was getting much more popular afterwards, because in the wartime nobody cared about the poems and literacies, and when the people recovered from the war and take their memories or memory to their old friends, their parents, their grandparents, or the dead in the wars, the poems that deeply reflected the wars and the situations would get the most appreciations. This poem definitely was among the top list, with such a simple picturesque diagram descriptions, depictings, but underneath it reflects so many things during the war. Okay, that's for today. Bye-bye.